I'll be monitoring them and we'll go through them at the end. Any questions that we can't answer, we've got sort of contact details from myself and Kuldip, so we'll follow up with any that we can't answer afterwards, but do our best to answer as many as we can. I think Kuldip's going to be recording this session as well, so that'll be widely sort of distributed as well. So just a short introduction to myself for anyone that doesn't know me. I'm Dan Melrose. I'm one of the principal consultants on our higher education team at Real Staffing. We are basically a full service contingent contract recruitment agency that specialises in placing day rate contractors and providing managed services consultancy to life sciences and public sector. So we've been doing that to HE now for about 15 years or so. And over the course of that time, developed a really kind of deep understanding of the sector through our networks that we've built and through being part of kind of membership groups like UCISA. So today, obviously, I'm with Kuldip, who, like us, has a real kind of passion for driving positive growth and like meaningful change within the sector. So Kuldip's a digital and IT transformation specialist, change advisor, and consultant with over 25 years experience. He's worked across higher education, local government, banking, finance, events, lots of different sectors, very, very experienced. He's also worked with a number of global consultancies, so PwC's CIO advisory practice, TCS's global consultancy, and also developed the CIO advisory practice for PTS Consulting, which is a sort of smaller boutique IT consultancy. So a good range of skills in there. Most recently, he's won and delivered digital transformation initiatives at the likes of Durham University, University of Cambridge, British Transport Police, Wakefield District Council, Hogan Lovells, and the Excel Convention Centre in London. He's got a lot of experience managing big teams of over 100, budgets of up to 10+ million, worked with a number of well-renowned clients across the public and private sector like RBS, Citigroup, Slaughter and May, Coventry Council, University of London, and also UCAS as well. So I've got a big list of things here that Kuldip's done. He's worked with numerous technology partners as well, things like HPE, BMC, Samsung, Cisco, Microsoft, as well as many others as well. Finally, I just thought I'd mention he's done a number of kind of articles that he's authored as well, and also papers, blogs that relate to how IT and IT functions need to adapt to the digital age. So these can be found on his website, which we'll share with you afterwards as well. But some of these things include digital business innovation through IT function agility, cybersecurity in the HE sector, enterprise agility for the digital age, and also how the IT function must adapt to the drive for digital transformation post-Covid-19. So I think following our previous webinar, we looked at what September might look like for higher education. Since then, Kuldip and I have had a number of meetings and sort of clubbed together to develop today's session for you and look at the impact of COVID-19 on the sector and the move towards this new digital normal. So hopefully what we want you to get out of it, from the information and the data that we've gathered across the sector is things like, the overall impact of COVID-19 on things like student admissions, teaching, learning, back office operations, that sort of stuff, implications, but also opportunities for higher education as well. I think that's really key to look at, how universities can benefit from this as well. What needs need to be understood and managed today and in the near future to enable a blended end user experience, which I think, is on everyone's mind at the moment. And finally, building a broader digital capabilities so that those with deep skills can flourish, can thrive in a world that is ultimately going to be enabled now by digital transformation. So that's just a brief kind of overview of us and of what we're hoping to gain from today. So Kuldip, over to you.
Thank you, Dan, for that great welcome and introduction. And even a warmer welcome to all of you that joined and have come along to listen to this webinar session. As Dan said, we will be recording it and making it available on the LinkedIn kind of stream. And we really look forward to some of your questions. As Dan said, if you have a question, do post it on the chat function in Zoom. I am going to dive straight in, and hopefully you can all see my screen. So I'll do a quick intro, just a little bit more about some of the things I've done to set some context. The presentation is going to last between 40 to 45 minutes. There's a lot of content, there's a lot of data. That's mainly because I'm very data centric, and I want to get across some of the key points. The slides are quite dense. They're meant to be, but I'm going to be just going through what are the key points and some of the messages, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So just a little bit about me. As Dan said, I've worked across sectors. I've worked in HE, and particularly some of the clients, as you can see on the slide there. And in my HE roles, I've worked on business strategy to student experience, right across to developing tech strategies for Durham University. And most recently, I did a short piece of work at Manchester University, just looking at a diagnostic piece of the CTO function. I set up my practice or my business 3-4 years ago. And really our strapline is that we solve digital and IT transformation problems that you think can't be solved. We sit at that intersection between business and IT, and we act as that translator, ensuring that the digital student research outcomes are met through technology enabling digital transformation across the institution. My presentation is going to, as I said, it's going to cover a number of areas. I'm going to look at the global impact of COVID-19, what the timeline and how HE institutions responded to that timeline. I've got some survey results from Voice of the Students. I'm going to look at 3 scenarios which detail the impact of COVID-19 and how HE institutions will respond or could respond, and the implications and opportunities for HE institutions. And then within those opportunities, I'm going to focus on 2 areas: the long-term growth and how that could be achieved at a high level. And then I'm going to go into some of the kind of more on the kind of digital and IT angle, and seeing how really IT departments have learned to adapt and work in a different way, and that how we can leverage that momentum and that experience to drive digital transformation across our institution in a much more structured and coherent and rapid way. I'll wrap it up with some key takeaways, and as I said, open it up to Q&A and go from there. Okay, I think the world, I think you can realize, I think the world has changed COVID-19. There's been a massive social impact. There's been an economical impact. Here's some data, some plots that show you that impact. For example, the oil price for a barrel of oil dropped below 0. It went down negative to -20 on the left-hand side. US unemployment peaked at, there's something like 20 million unemployed in the US. Unemployment in the UK is increasing. We've got a furlough system that's where I think there's something quite close to 9 to 10 million people on the furlough scheme, which is 1/3 of the UK working population. In the middle, you can see a little plot that shows the impact of COVID-19 on global education. Something like 1.5 billion people, learners, were impacted from schools to further education to higher education. They all had to learn or develop their skills remotely and virtually. One of the positive things about COVID-19 is the bottom in the middle there. Telemedicine has emerged where GPs can now treat their patients, not physically, but listen to their concerns and administer support and well-being through a video call or a conference call, and on minor ailments and so forth. On the upside, there have been some winners. The stock markets obviously jumped down by around 35% in April, March, but there are some winners. So if you look at the top right there, you can see the share price for Zoom, Netflix, and Amazon, and you can see everybody's moved on to using virtual video conferencing facilities, and these companies, they're all tech companies, have been doing very, very well. So how is that? How's HE responded in that sort of 3 or 4 months that we've been coping with the pandemic? So this is the timeline that I've established. Sort of in January, China kind of imposed the lockdown in Wuhan. The World Health Organization declared the outbreak, and there was international concern globally. 29 countries in February went down in lockdown. the high-risk countries, and quarantine measures were instigated. Major countries then introduced travel bans, and the external borders were closed, and a pandemic was declared in around March, April. First countries imposed restriction movements, shutting schools and businesses, and lockdown prevailed. And in May onwards, especially in the UK, we've been starting to take some baby steps as we kind of move out of lockdown and easing that in a slow, structured way, with some interesting announcements as schools started reopening. Major sporting events started again in middle of June, and now coming into July, there's going to be further restriction, easing of the 2 meter social distancing rule down to 1. So how did HE respond? Well, in February, universities were exploring various options, as a lot of the international students couldn't travel back, and how could they administer their classes online. Universities in kind of March, April started preparing for campus shutdowns, and many did shut, and all in-person classes disappeared, and students were told to go home. Some universities started announcing teaching online for the new academic year 2021, and some universities, for example, Imperial College and Cambridge University, have now declared that all online lectures will prevail for the next year. And whereas University of Bolton, for example, they will be having their students back on campus come September, October, with a whole plethora of social distancing and health and safety controls instigated on premise. And finally, just get this right, I've just got some of the people entering. There's been a sharp increase in student deferrals, 2 to 3%. So what does that mean? That's a £460 million drop in spending in tuition and living expenses. Some people might think 2 or 3% is not great, but there's a long-term impact as well. There's been formal petitioning by student bodies. I think there's been like 350,000 signatures from students asking for fees to be reimbursed. And universities are in the throw of developing detailed plans for the new academic year. So what have the students been saying? So I attended a webinar quite recently, and I grabbed some data, which is kind of the voice of the student, and I wanted to share that with everybody. What you can see here is some data and a survey that was conducted by the Higher Education Policy Institute and Advanced HE survey, where I think they got something like 10,000 student responses during the period of 17th of February to the 4th of April. And what that really shows is, if you see the green line on the graph on the left, that there's a decrease in the value perceived by students. And there's 2 particular areas that has caused that devalueness, or actually reduction in the value of their education that they perceive. One obviously was, I think in an earlier year, there was strikes and how that was impacting their lessons. And what you can see on the right-hand side, some actual selected comments from the survey and comments from students, and it's quite obvious, as you can see on the right-hand side. There's comments around coronavirus. It means that I paid £9,000 tuition fees, but I only had 1 seminar in the term. So lost out because of the strikes and COVID-19. And what this really is trying to bring across is the point that students see absolutely, and only rightly, see that there's a decrease in the value of their teaching and learning, and potentially the quality of that service, especially as with in a lot of cases, university will be providing that teaching and learning online in the near future. So I'm going to now move into 3 scenarios, and the 3 scenarios are going to be: scenario 1 is, if the economy and the world recovers very quickly, and especially in the UK, what does that mean for admissions, teaching and learning, and staff and back office operations? My second scenario, so the first scenario is a kind of the V-shaped return, or the bounce back that I think government talk about. The second scenario is the U-shaped return, where the return back to normality from a social and economic perspective is a little bit slower, and then you get the tick box return to normality, which is a prolonged recession, and and the impact of that across those three areas. So let's kick off with the V-shaped recovery. I think from an admissions point of view, I think already mentioned, if there's a V-shaped recovery, it'll be a one-off kind of impact for next year. There'll be some deferments and maybe some cancellations and rejections, but the sector can recover quite quickly from a revenue perspective, and hoping that the government continues to support the sector and the institutions going forward. From a teaching and learning perspective, well, travel bans means that overseas students might be able to return and adhering to social distancing measures. Online learning will predominate. Certainly, I know, for example, Manchester and St Andrews have said that they will do on learning for the first term and see how that goes, and then move into maybe some more physical learning. But that's going to be quite difficult, particularly dependent on the course and the type of how practical some of those courses can be. But that's going to be something for the universities to be planning and working throughout with academics as well. From a back office perspective and operations, there's a sharp impact on the bottom line, especially if students start asking for refunds. And I've been listening to some radio interviews with students quite recently, and they are looking, some of them, especially first year new students, are deferring, and second year, third years are asking for some rebates on their tuition fees based on their perceived lack of quality of their teaching going forward. I think universities are in the process of incurring additional expenses, especially when they're investing in underlying infrastructure, virtual learning environments and new modules, and how they can create existing content and make that into online content, and actually making sure it is a very interactive and a value perceived experience for the students. So what does it look like for a sustained recession? Well, it could lead to cancelled admission tests, examinations and graduations. I haven't put a definitive timeline here. So I think if you get a V-shape, we're talking next 2 or 3 months, U-shape maybe more 6 months, maybe plus, recruitment events. So back to the U-shape, I think from an admissions point of view, recruitment events and further travel bans will dampen the international admissions for next year and going on further. And I think what will exacerbate the competition for domestic students will increase as overseas students can't travel or won't want to come. The competition for university to attract students in the UK will increase. Institutions may, from a teaching and learning perspective, will want to switch to the online proposition, and that will require sophisticated learning tools. Whilst we have Moodle and other VLE kind of platforms, we need to make sure that they're tested, they're examined, and examinations are run in a strict way, so that there is all even-handedly carried out. And also, I think there'll be a decline in ancillary revenues. In research funding might disappear for overseas research funds, and universities have other additional revenue streams such as conferences, and how will they be able to compensate when there's less? It's not easy to have mass gatherings and conferences and exhibitions and other kind of events on campus. From a back office point of view, as if the recovery is slower, there's be constrained budgets. There'll be a hard, sharpened look at capital spend if it's not already happening already. Financiers will be looking to see where the spend is essential, and if there's shrinking state budgets and allocations to universities, and I think government have stopped or haven't pumped money into the sector as requested, there could be some serious challenges around looking at costs and hiring freezes and potential layoff for staff in the future potentially. If the recession continues even longer than that, I think, I'm just going to get on to scenario 3. If the economic downturn is a lot longer and protracted, I think graduate enrollment and job-seeking population will try to use a lot of people who might be out of education or just graduating might carry on to do secondary or postgraduate studies, and actually there'll be a competitive edge for those that want, you will be seeking a competitive edge to get back into the job market, and they might use HE as a way of upskilling themselves. So there could be you could kind of create a competitive market for attracting students, and that's where maybe universities need to look at different types of teaching programs. From a teaching and learning perspective, there could be an extended period of online delivery. So, we've gone from a 20 off to 18 on premise, and that has totally switched. And if this, if wave 2 or wave 3 of the pandemic hits, and as some universities have already said, we will continue to provide teaching online. And universities, we need to grasp that as a major differentiator. I think that's where marketing, branding, and the underlying infrastructure and technology and those virtual platforms are going to be key and could be differentiators for universities to attract students in the longer term. And that's where that kind of digital first digital university and that blended hybrid model, or where the student comes on premise when required for a short period of time, and then is off premise doing their learning, where they're going through lectures that have been captured on premise. From back office perspective, again, deeper cuts potentially to spending on essential categories, and looking at how to utilize on-premise university campuses in a different way. And there could be emergence of different staffing models as we start using maybe 3 days on, 3 days off, and a rota kind of support model for teaching and learning and academics. So let's move on. So I've kind of painted the impact, but now I think there's a lot of upsides and opportunities for institutions. And I just wanted to highlight 4 of those, and I'll go deeper into 2 of them. The first one is obviously ensuring and protecting the existing revenue and cohort, so that this is where the opportunity is really to strengthen the existing propositions, so that you retain those students and look at what other customer base or student base, and looking at what other countries that could be tapped for international students, and thinking about alternative reimagined programs. So distant learning could be kind of the key program for the future. And maybe there's some business school type programs where MBAs or extent MBAs done on distance learning could come to the fore. While still a crowded market, it could be a differentiator going forward. Secondly, cost optimization. Again, that's going to be a key one while we maintain quality of service and delivery of teaching. And I think the key focus here is making sure that the digital solutions really support the institution to act as a differentiator while you're reducing spend in certain areas. And I think for a longer term kind of restructure, some of the smaller universities might want to be thinking about mergers and acquisitions, where it's maybe better to join forces to attract students in a newer teaching and a new virtual environment with reimagined programs for the longer term. And this is where I think the longer term strategies or the corporate strategies of institutions need to be transformed with a new capabilities and new partnerships for the future. And my hobby horse, the final area, is about how we use the digital agenda to drive the transformation that a lot of higher education institutions were embarking on pre-COVID. So, and this is where I'm going to be talking I'll talk a little bit about item 3, but in a little bit more detail, definitely in item 4, and how I think a new adaptive digital model has emerged for the delivery of agile IT services. And it's now a moment for senior IT leaders in higher education to grasp the momentum and the moment to around digital transformation in higher education. So moving along, item 3, the ones I'll delve into. Item 3 is all about thinking about your strategy and the vision. And what that means is thinking about your business model. And the business model is how you deliver your teaching, your learning, and research. And this is where you have to really pivot. Everybody's talking about pivoting. So pivoting is about thinking about your strategy and vision for the future and how you re-engineer your competencies for the future so you deliver your value proposition. And my experience of the financial crisis in 2008 certainly showed, and this is embedded in research from McKinsey and Booz and Allen, that the organizations that actually invest in innovation are the ones that survive and succeed in the longer term. And we must remember that this is an opportunity for organizations and institutions to repivot themselves so that they can come out stronger and thriving for the future. And I think that hybrid, blended delivery model of virtual and physical is hopefully the one that I think is going to stick as we come out of the crisis. So what does that mean? Well, it requires the university to kind of have a hard look at its corporate strategy. And there are so many strands to a corporate strategy. And I've tried to pull that together in this slide. As you can see, it's looking about your research, it's looking about your teaching and learning, it's looking about your campus footprint, it's looking at how you engage the businesses in your community, how you think about recruitment, how do you bring about academic performance and teaching and learning performance when you're teaching online? How does that get measured and monitored? How do you create content online? What does that mean for careers and staff in professional services who are supporting academics and with the HR function and the finance function? And what does that mean from a sourcing and a procurement perspective? And obviously, how does the university get governed and how does the operating model look like in the future? Which is all geared around digital and change management and where leaders at the university want to pivot. So the second area I was going to jump into is highlighted in red there. As you can see, there's a digital service delivery and IT strategy. Now that's where I've traditionally been operating within the business context. And I'm now going to talk a little bit about what's happened as we've transitioned from pre to in lockdown to post into the new norm. What does that mean for technology and service delivery as supporting what this new scenario could be? So what I've highlighted here is the technology touch points for a student or a staff. Here you got your front office, middle office, kind of back office infrastructure. Typically at a university, you've got your front office where you've got your digital signage, your wayfinding, your meeting and lecture rooms. And in the back office, you've got your virtual learning environments, your collaboration tools, and your planned platforms. And in the new world and during lockdown, we've had to focus ourselves on certain aspects to ensure that we can continue providing the teaching and learning. And this is an ongoing process. This is not complete yet. But I wanted to highlight to you that there's been so many touch points, and the touch points there are shown in red. And how does that come across? Well, I pulled together a little bit of some results on the future spend on IT in education. So a rather very detailed slide, but let me just quickly highlight to you. This is a report that came out earlier this week, and this report is a survey of IT professionals and senior IT leaders on their on the potential spend and cuts in IT going forward. And you can see in the blue fan areas, the growth areas, which is learning management software, security software, remote desktop software, collaboration tools. And whilst there's cuts in HR, finance, and other marketing software tools, but the overriding thought was that this has given us an opportunity, a catalyst for change. And importantly, as you can see in my slide here, they asked with the industries where there was going to be more spending or less spending or no change. And funny enough, whilst this is not just particularly higher education, you can see education at the top. The professional said there's probably likely to be more spending or than a lot of the other sectors, as you can see there from finance, computer, marketing, and healthcare. So, which is an interesting observation, and this is real data. This is not my data. This is data from Raconteur that was published earlier this week. So, a real positive sign in that sense. So, what does that mean from the student perspective? Here's some more data from HPI Advanced HE, which is going to be published later this year. What it clearly shows is that students value technology. They very much feel it as a key part of their learning experience as they go through their academic careers. But the overlying sentiment is that students feel that they have a better experience at university if they have the technology at hand. And that's what the top right-hand graph is trying to show, the value they perceive from their teaching experience when technology works for them. But I'm also conscious that the period, last 2-3 months we've gone through has caused a lot of anxiety and stress, not only to us and our staff, but also to students. And you can see that students actually feel that they are very, very anxious around mental health and well-being for the future as they go through higher education. Students, absolutely, again, they value technology, and you can see on the graph on the left-hand side there on this slide that using desktops, laptops, tablets is part of their DNA in higher education, and they really thrive and they value it because they want to have reliable Wi-Fi, being able to access course material online, getting ebooks and e-journals, being able to store their content and information in the cloud, and having lectures recorded for them. And I think this is some data that I captured from JISC, which is some digital experience insights that's coming out in September. And what they really were saying, which is part of the key messages on the right-hand side there, is that students feel that they should have digital skills embedded in their teaching and courses, so that's an ongoing piece. It's something that they value when they go out into the workplace, and if they feel that they should be grasping and being taught those digital skills as they go through their academic careers. And I think that's a good thing, because we should be encouraging collaboration and making sure that students get good business practices, because when they get out into the workplace, technology is now prevalent in all our work, in all our work across sectors, and we should only rightly support students in that during their teaching experience. So, what did I mean by the accelerated workplace element of the COVID? And what I'm just trying to show here quickly is what we were doing pre-COVID in grey. In yellow is what's happened when we moved to working online, and this is where I particularly wanted to focus in on how we accelerated our journey to working from home. So we went from 20% working from home to 80%. We did that in a really agile way. A lot of, I was speaking to a COO at a major university recently and other leaders, and they were saying how quickly a lot of the IT departments were able to get equipment built and get software licenses agreed for VPN access and get them out using cloud-based technologies. So we went from this placid response pre-COVID to a dynamic response. And I think what we're now moving to in IT is more of a kind of, which I've coined the new norm, is where we accelerate the use of technology rapidly and quickly. We iterate it, we learn from any failures, and then we make sure it's secure and it's we've got a good cybersecurity, and we move to this adaptive digital model. So I'm just going to focus in on the yellow area first and the green, and I'm kind of going to draw some conclusions around that. So let's. So in the yellow areas, we wanted. I think IT departments were very quick, including in higher education. They were very quick in getting Zoom up, or Microsoft Teams work, or the Google Suite working. But we always need to be conscious that we want to monitor the corporate and the personal usage, and we wanted to maintain contact with our teams and making sure that we're communicating with them, making sure they're productive and they feel valued, because the remoteness still distracts from the sentimental value of an attachment to an organization. So that was very key. What I think COVID-19 has done has moved us rapidly to remote working. And what that is all about, in my sense, is we've actually been driving change faster. And I think just to kind of highlight the point, I think before COVID was here, we were adopting technology at an increased pace. As you can see on the left-hand side, it took 68 years to get 50 million users of the aircraft. It took two years for Twitter, and for the Pokemon Go game, it took 19 days to get to 50 million users. And I think if you can see on the right-hand side, you can see the rapid adoption of technology changing at an exponential rate. But what we do in organizations, we move at a more of a slower pace, and therefore this gap appears between the fastness and the slowness, and we need to reset our organization. And I think the pandemic and the IT has been given a massive opportunity to to stand up and successfully demonstrated how to use agile deployment technology techniques to leverage online learning for teaching. And it's happening right across, not just HE, it's happening across other sectors. And what I think the adaptive new digital model, we've had the traditional project management techniques of going through structured waterfall methodologies from feasibility to analysis to planning and building and test. And some organizations and institutions were moving to more agile techniques, whether we're designing, building, training, testing, feeding back iteratively. But I think the new norm gives us the opportunity to think about what's really out there. What can we use? Can we start using it? Let's share some feedback. If it works, let's scale it. If it doesn't, let's learn from our failures. But if it scales and it's valued, let's rapidly adopt it. Let's roll it out, and we can then iteratively update it through agile sprints, and then we can integrate it with the systems. I think that new model is the one that's emerging, certainly for IT, as I've been talking to many senior IT leaders across sectors and across HE. So what does that mean? What does that mean for HE and IT? Well, I think there's an opportunity for institutions to grasp that momentum, as I said, and the future CIO or the IT leaders is the one that's going to be playing a larger role in actually the corporate strategy and part of digital transformation, so that you can achieve those iterative business outcomes. It doesn't mean you still do the legacy CIO work, but maybe that's something that's done by IT operations. And I think this adaptive model will bring about cultural and behavioral change, and technology can drive that within the business and institution. Okay, I think I'm now close to summarizing some of my thoughts. Just to wrap all this up, I think it's very unclear yet if we are going to have a V, U, or a prolonged recession, and what that recovery type will be. I think one thing I can put my hand on and say is that the financial crisis taught me one thing, is that organizations adapt quickly and invest in innovation are the ones that succeed in the long term. In the short, medium, and long term, I think a strategic view and an operational view must be taken into consideration to assess the impact of COVID-19. I think I've shared some of those views, looking at teaching and learning, admissions, the back office, and the longer term view around how students can thrive in that new environment. I think there's a great opportunity for IT to rise to the occasion, to enable digital transformation and change, and for the CIO to become part of that C-suite to drive that strategic change. Whilst investments are going to be difficult, we need to be prudent about those investments and look at priority areas and efficiency gains, and looking at budget shortfalls. We need to make sure that we spend on the right areas and non-core spend. I think the focus has to be on ensuring that the student experience for delivering of teaching and research in a hybrid delivery model is looked at, and that requires looking at that student experience, not just right across the university, but looking at faculty and at faculty level, school level, at department level. And I think it's important that, again, IT spend and strategy is aligned to the corporate strategy, and we try to learn from the experiences over the last 2-3 months in that adaptive approach to change across organizations and institutions. I am going to leave you with a final thought and a little diagram there from a marketunist, which shows digital transformation is years away. I don't see my company or institution ever changing soon. And there comes COVID-19 to change the apple cart. I hope you've enjoyed me talking. I hope I've been insightful. I'm going to hand back to Dan so that we can go into Q&A, and hopefully we've got some time to do that. And I need to unmute you, Dan.
There we go. Yeah, no, perfect. That was brilliant. Thank you for that, Kuldip. We've had a couple of questions come in already. So we've got about sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so. So if anyone does want to sort of put some questions in the chat box now, then we'll get them answered. But yeah, so one from me. So as a senior IT leader yourself, what would you kind of recommend other leaders do to accelerate digital and IT transformation now?
I think it's those lessons learned over the last 2-3 months as IT departments have helped and supported working from home. I think there's some valuable lessons learned around looking at a product and looking at it from we can grab that product, we can do a quick market test. It's not full, hasn't got the full functionality, but it will allow us to achieve the main things we want to. Let's trial it. Let's get it working. If it works, let's try to scale it. And we've proved that. We've done that with Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet. Some of these products are not fully functional, right? And so there's lots of features that we could enhance them. So, that learning around doing things in an agile way is something that I think we need to grasp and take that into our methods and our frameworks for creating IT solutions that can help not only staff and academics, but students as well. But for example, developing an app, you can do that quite quickly these days. Maybe developing a chatbot. There's loads of AI technology out there as well that can really scale quite quickly if we're not only do we have the intuition to do it, but now I think senior leaders are seeing how quickly we were able to do workplace digital transformation. We were forced to do it. So, and we were very reactive to it, very responsive to it. So why can't we carry on in that frame?
Okay, no, interesting, interesting. We had a question from Andrea Buttle throughout the presentation, which was we might need a bit of clarity on this one, but it was, where's the timetabling system? It's small but critical. Andrea, are you able to sort of expand on that? Do you know at which point of the presentation were you referring to? Maybe is it possible to unmute her, Kuldip? Do you know?
Yeah, yes, let's try and do that. Andrea Buttle, yep. Right. You should be off mute now.
Okay, so it's to some extent it's a small point, but it can feed to a bigger point. So there's a couple of things here. The timetabling system, yeah, all right. It was one slide early on. You talk about student records,
yeah,
and you've got a list of systems. You missed out timetabling, but you know, it is only a small system. I agree, but they're also they're not clouded. Or only a very few are clouded at the moment within UK universities. How important, a couple of questions here, how important is it to put the corporate systems into the cloud? Should that be a priority? And two, I suppose I have a concern that the corporate systems will get forgotten and all the focus will be on WYSI online learning systems. And yet I think there's a lot of money needs spending on the corporate systems, the back office, but I think that's where that's the area that will attract all the cost cutting.
Yeah, the cost cutting, or do you say cost cutting?
Yeah, so I think back office will attract cost cutting, and all the investment will go into learning systems. Yeah,
I agree. So my experiences of working at a number of universities has shown me there's a lot of legacy IT. A lot of systems have been developed over time in-house. I can't name various universities where I've seen a lot of that, but there's a lot of shadow IT that goes on, and there's a lot of legacy IT systems. And what I think universities need to do is really have a hard look at what they can retire, what they need to continue to invest in, what they can move to the cloud, and what they can give back to the faculty or the department, because it's very specialist software, and maybe they're best to support it and run with it. So I absolutely agree that there needs to be that kind of look at back office and front office system. I didn't want to leave timetabling out at all. Not at all. There's so much information on that.
I know.
Yeah? So timetabling is going to be absolutely important, because it's part of each academic year, and making sure that they, a student, when they come on site, all they want to do is authenticate, have Wi-Fi. They get on their app, they can see their timetable and their faculty department, and they can, they crack on with whatever they need to do, right? So absolutely time. I didn't purposely leave it out, but I think it's a very important thing. And my final comment around cloud. There are various reasons why you can or you should move to the cloud. And what I find when I worked at, not just in HE institutions, but in other sectors, what they don't do is they don't go through a period of actually doing a kind of cloud assessment to actually work out why they want to move. Why will it be beneficial for them to move their infrastructure off campus or off site? What's the value there? Is there reduced spend, less capital spend on hardware and so forth? Or is it a case of a hybrid model where there's some on-premise and some public? And there's probably very good reasons why you don't want to keep some of your cloud infrastructure on-premise, because of GDPR and privacy and personal data. There's lots of personal data that flows around a campus and a university that you don't want to be sharing in the cloud, right? So there's got to be just good. I think what I'm really trying to say, cloud is a good thing. There's lots of reasons and benefits of doing it. It's just understanding why you want to do it. And you have to look at each application and each system on its own merits for doing them.
Thanks.
Excellent. So we had another question from Bernard Marshall, which was, is this a window to create standardized low-cost back office services across the sector? There's also a second one, which is there a consensus on where fees might land? If you can.
I'll try to answer that one. Well, thank you, Bernard. I know Bernard very well, so it's great questions. On the fee side, remember there's no cap. There's no cap on fees. So even though, what I mean by that is, although there's £9,250 for tuition fees, a university doesn't have to charge that, right? So if we're going into a world where the student perception is that the experience is not going to be as it should be, or as it would have been in the past, maybe universities need to think about what they're charging for their students. Okay, and especially if there's going to be a lot of deferrals, and international students are not going to certainly be coming to the UK in the near future. So there's a thought there that I would leave. On the back office side, I'd love to have a discussion with you about it, because you could look at the back office in its entirety. So you could look at what efficiency gains you could do with certain departments. So, you know, in professional services, you've got IT, typically IT, corporate estates, the libraries, the HR, the finance function. I hope I haven't missed any others, but you know, you could kind of look at that in a holistic model and see where you could look at business processes across those functions and see how the touch points on how you can improve business processes, and then how you could automate. There's lots of automation technology now, like people talk about RPA, and you know, lots of automation technology that can help processing a lot of back-end task. So definitely an area to focus in on, and maybe this is the time to do that.
Good. And I think we've probably got time for one more. So what changes do you think will stay in this new normal?
That's a great question.
It's a big question.
What will stick? What will stick? Okay. I hope the adaptive approach that I've kind of highlighted will stick, because it's given, as I said, it's given IT an opportunity to do things in a different way. I think traditionally, and it's not just in HE, there are usually blockers, or there's silos, or there's groups that don't quite accept technology change. And we are creatures, as humans, as creatures, we're quite resistant to change. So we need to accept that. So I think this has given IT an opportunity to show their wares. So I think hopefully the adaptive model gets embraced, and that's one area that will stick. I think some of the other things that will stick, and kind of, I'm just thinking on the campus front end, you know, there's going to be technology around, potentially around thermal scanning, students, social distance, the tools that actually, there are technology tools that allow you to measure the space that you're socially distancing between students and staff. So I think some of that stuff will come to the fore. So social distancing, thermal scanning tools. I think even facial recognition might emerge. It's emerging. For example, my most recent role, I was at the Excel Convention Center. And now, you know, facial recognition is really, really important, so that we can assess if people are socially distancing, and we can tell if somebody in a room or a corridor or wherever you're able to adhere to the new health and safety protocols that will be in place across sectors and organizations. What else will stick? I think working from home. I don't know what the split will be. You know, we've gone from 80-20 to flip the other way. Maybe it will rebalance itself to 50-50. I think there were a lot of people beforehand that said, why don't people work from home? I find it's you know, because of their circumstances and their careers, they were able to do that. But I think we've proven that working from home in certain jobs can be done from home. I'm not saying it's for everybody, because some people will have hands-on kind of hands-on roles, operational roles, which require you know, being on premise. So I think there's going to be something sticking there. I think. I hope I've given us a few examples.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. That sounds good. Um, Excellent. Well, if I think that's a good time to sort of call it a day. We're bang on 5 o'clock, which is good. So if anyone does have any sort of follow up questions, feel free to email myself or Kuldip directly, and we'll do our best to answer them as well. But I really hope everyone found that useful, and got some good takeaways from that. And yeah, we'll let you know sort of when the next one is, I suppose.
And I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time out to hearing us, and if you hope you enjoyed it, and it was insightful.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.